Life before receiving treatment can be difficult. And really, not only is each illness itself different, everyone's individual experience with the illness is as well. So tonight, we are introducing you to community members diagnosed with mental illnesses who have worked their way out of that darkness. Louis Bianco has been struggling with his mental health since he was 15 years old and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Christopher Dreisbach has been on a path he says led him to addiction since he was just 13 years old. Both of these incredible men sat down with me to tell us what life was like before they got help.
Sensitive. Out of the rest of my siblings, my feelings were hurt more easily. I would cry more often. I would say medication started when I was hospitalized for the first time my junior year. So that would have been around 2000, 2001. I was receiving things like therapy and outpatient treatment. When the 9th grade piece started, I was in the guidance counselor's office a lot, but once I had what I would call my first episode, that's when the medication started, and I started to go into the lockdown psychiatric facilities, and everything really started to plummet.
So my experience with addiction started when I was 13 years old, and I went to a family wedding, and I saw a lot of the adults drinking and having a good time, and I also kind of was 13 years old and very large and growing facial hair, and I kind of went up to that open bar and I started drinking. And what happened for me was it took all of the uncomfortability that I experienced as a kid and washed it away. And from 13 on, I really constantly chased that feeling, and I had to move on to the next level of substances and the next level of substances and the next level of substances until I landed on heroin at 17, and that took me way, way, way off course.
They had so many, before we really nailed it down to bipolar and PTSD, they said I had traits of obsessive compulsive disorder. It was at one point major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. They saw borderline personality disorder. I was manipulative. In the mental health field, there's somewhat of a hesitancy to diagnose something like bipolar at that early of an age.
There were so many moments where I knew I needed help, but I was unable to muster the brain capacity to make it happen, because addiction, substance use disorder, whatever you want to call it, is a brain illness, and it creates a neural pathway that blocks my ability to reason. So even though I know inherently I have a terrible, terrible issue, something that's really damaging my life in so many ways, I can't physically, emotionally, in any way handle that or push myself towards recovery, because I believe that this is my reality and this is the only thing that I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life.
There was a number of years early on where I somewhat expected it to go away. And in that expectation, every time it returned, there would be disappointment, high levels of disappointment. And in that disappointment, there would be dysfunction, and I would falter again and fail.
That's just the beginning of Chris and Louis's stories. Still to come, they open up about their time receiving treatment, as well as what life is like now living with their diagnoses. Stay with us. Silence the Stigma. We'll be right back. The step people struggling with a mental illness find daunting and sometimes even terrifying is admitting that they need help. Even if the resources are there and available, taking that first step to get treatment can be difficult. Chris and Louis shared their experiences about getting the help they needed, even in unexpected ways, and their views on the stigmas attached to it.
When I was first hospitalized, my roommate was a 40-year-old who was receiving electric shock therapy. So there wasn't a teenage unit or a child and adolescent unit. Now we found one, but locally there wasn't initially. I was the only teenager on that unit. There were also some requirements and duties that I had to fulfill as a patient in order to have visitors. And because it was my first time being medicated, I wasn't always able to get the amount of points I needed, so then I also didn't get the familial support and get visitors.
The first time that I went to treatment when I was probably 18 years old, so the county of Lehigh paid for me to go to an old state hospital in Wernersville, Pennsylvania, with some very antiquated models of recovery. And by the time I got in, I didn't want to get clean at all, and it just turned pretty disastrous. And all the rest of my treatment experiences were through the criminal justice system, because unfortunately, I continually ran afoul of the criminal justice system. When I was 18 years old, I got charged with felony burglary and criminal trespass because I walked into another person's house and took a needle.
But I'm 39 and I've had electric shock therapy, and I don't remember the majority of my life. And now here I am looking in the mirror, seeing a person that I wonder, like, how did I get here? So it's hope that continues to push me forward. It's something, it's hard to describe because it's abstract. And we want direct answers, we want concrete answers, we want the 30-day fix, we want the medication that works immediately. But if we go back to the concept that this process is so long, hope is literally that thread that keeps us hanging on during the moments of distress.
You're kind of looked down upon societally as a drug addict, if you will. And that's, neither here nor there. It just kind of is what it is. I was unable to maintain sobriety outside of jail, so my parole officer would repeatedly take me back to jail, and when I would get back out of jail, they would try their best to get me into another treatment facility, and on and on and on. It was a constant failure for me until finally a judge shipped me here to Lancaster County, where I was able to get involved with some support systems and local AA meetings, and I met a group of people who showed me a different way to live, which I haven't let go of in the last 16 years.
The stigma of being somebody with a mental illness, one of the major things I have learned and that I try to encourage others is that we can't stop other people from seeing us as they choose to see us.
Once someone is diagnosed with a mental illness, the reality is they live with it forever in one way or another. Chris and Lewis share what life is like now as they move forward each day knowing that, with the hopes of letting others know they're never alone.
And I think it was probably the weirdest part was crossing over. I probably used drugs and alcohol for 7 or 8 years of my life, and when I crossed that threshold past that, I think it was one of those kind of defining moments where, I already knew this was my life path, but I really felt it.
I've lost jobs, I've lost relationships. Sometimes it's been my own doing, sometimes it's because of preconceived notions. I appear too healthy to be ill, or I appear too ill to be healthy. And the perceptions of others, I'm at the mercy of it. But if I stop and say that's not fair, then the only progress I'm halting is my own.
I would say maintaining sobriety is not difficult every single day. If you feel like it's difficult every single day, look into some other programs, look into some other resources, look into some other supports, because recovery is not meant to be a doldrum, sad struggle and fight. Recovery is empowering. Recovery is strength. Recovery is power. Recovery is being able to walk amongst everybody else and feel like you belong.
My greatest hope at this moment is that we realize, as important as awareness is, that awareness is not our solution. I often compare it to the scientific method. As a nurse, we recognize a problem, so we start there, absolutely. Then we hypothesize what could be the answer. We take educated guesses, and at some point we have to start experimenting. And those experiments will succeed or fail, and if they fail, then we document what went wrong, what went right, and then we experiment again. So my books, for example, and the different music that I've written, all these different creative endeavors and speaking engagements, some of them succeed and some of them fail, but my hopes are that we start to experiment.
And the value of being able to help other people achieve sobriety and achieve a life that they really want to live is so multiplicative. There's really so many different factors that go into it. I mean, number one, every single time you help somebody, it inherently helps everybody around them, which makes the world a better place. So I like doing that. Not only that, but it helps me. I feel tremendous when I get to watch somebody go from eating out of a dumpster to having their own business.